Alright guys, so here we are in Module 6, and this is where we're going to start to manipulate our objects in a different way. In other words, we're going to look at the components of our object, okay? And in the components, I mean the edges, the vertex or vertices, and the faces. And these are parts that make up the mesh, okay? And meshes are usually either quads or triangles. They do sometimes consist of n-gons, which are really not desirable because they do not deform well. But we're going to talk about each one of these, and I'm going to come up here to create, and I'm going to go to my polygon primitive selections here, and you can see we have quite a bit. But for this, I'm going to go to our faithful cube. Okay, here it is in the scene, and we have our translate tool out. So I'm going to hit F to frame it, and we can orbit around it, and we can look at our object. Now, right now, as we're in this particular mode, which is this object mode here, okay, we can move this object, either up, sideways, back and forth, and it moves the entire object, okay? And that's something to take into effect, because when you're developing additional surface qualities to this object, you will have to be in a different editing mode. I'm going to go ahead and close my outliner here so we have a little bit more real estate. So next, component mode. Oops, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it this way. I'm going to go up here to our shelf, and I'm going to select this icon. It's next to our object mode, and it's for component mode. So component mode, well, we'll talk about it here. Let's go ahead and go into it, and let's look at our cube now. Well, it's no longer green. It's this light blue lines here, and this gray, and the purple points here are what they call vertex or vertice, and this is just a place in space. In other words, it's a point that can be manipulated. It can be moved, which is kind of cool, and it needs to be, especially for organic modeling. But what's important about vertex is that they create an edge. So a point to a point is a line, right? Well, that is an edge. And we have 4 of them here, of course, to create our cube. Now, vertexes can be tricky to select too, so make sure that you are on them and make sure that they're highlighted before you select them. To go into our next component, the edge, I'm going to hold down Shift, and it reveals this hotbox. I'm going to select edge, the one on top there. And now when we hover over our edges, you can also look here. I'm not sure if your shelf will show it, but you may have options to choose an edge edit mode. Anyways, as we hover over each edge, you'll see it highlights red. Okay, and this allows us to select it. And again, if we wanted to, we can manipulate it. And if we hold down Shift, we can select multiple edges. Edges are, again, really important. So let's look at face. Edges, of course, make up the face. They are the 4 lines that create this quad face. And faces are really important. Of course they are. They show our materials. They show our textures. And they have to be organized just like any other object in the scene. Okay, they have to be created correctly. Faces also can be deleted, and we'll explore that as we start to develop more. And they're easily replaced too as well. So, don't worry as we start to deform our objects. I do want to show you another way to get back into our object mode, and that is, again, going to be utilized with our right click. Okay, and basically if you right click and hold, you will get this hotbox again. Okay, and that's shows our components, but it also shows an object mode. and that's where we want to go. Okay, we could easily go up to our toolbar, but this works a little bit faster. At least I like it. I'm going to go into my channel box here, and I'm going to show you some other ways that we can add resolution. How's that sound? That sounds pretty cool. Resolution. I hit 3 on my keyboard. What this does, it puts us into a smooth mode. It just gives us like a view of what it's going to look like when we smooth this model. And I'm going to show the bounding box as well, so that we can see how this model is being smoothed, how it's being compressed. It only has 4 lines right now, or very little resolution. 4 lines, what I mean is that it's being smoothed with a top, a bottom, a back, a front, and a side, and it gives us kind of this ball shape here. Well, that's because, again, there's not enough resolution on our cube. So if we go to our inputs here and we toggle that open, you can see that it gives us some other options: this width, height, depth, subdivision, width, height, and depth. Well, subdivisions are what create our resolution. They are additional edges and vertices that go onto our model that allow us to gain more resolution for manipulating shapes, for editing them. And so like I did here, I added some subdivision widths. I got 3 lines and then 4 lines for my subdivision height, and it kind of maybe bounds the box a little bit more. And I'm going to kind of make these all back to an even number, and we'll call it 3. Now it looks a little bit more like a pillow, right? Like a bean bag almost. So that's one way to kind of create a little bit more resolution, and going into your object and making sure that you have enough resolution for when you do smooth it, it turns out pretty nice. So let's look at some other modeling tools here. Another primitive are these curves and surfaces. You can also get them through Create, NURBS primitives, and you can select them through here. For now, I'm going to select this plane. Okay, and as you see, this plane, it's similar to a polygon. However, it's not. It's a little bit different. You want to kind of think of it as a almost like a piece of rubber, almost like something that you can bend and manipulate, fairly easily. Now these have components the same as primitives, and these components are selectable. Here we go. We can kind of look at how this works here. And as we start to kind of manipulate it, you can see it bends and deforms pretty nicely, okay, without adding further resolution to it. And so NURBS are good for certain particular development. You can kind of imagine what this particular primitive could be utilized for. But these little pink dots here, you can see they're not really a place in space like we were talking about with the polygons. They're more or less just on the surface there, and they are manipulated to where we can change the view of it. So let's go back into object mode. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to pull up a NURB sphere. Now a NURB sphere is essentially a NURB plane just wrapped around itself and then seamed. So in other words, if you took that plane and basically just folded it in on itself, well, here's better example would be the sphere. Same type. The cylinder. Same type thing. Is that it's just folded around. It's like it's a plane that's just folded and then seamed to connect. And you need to kind of take that into account, because certain times when you deform these, they can separate. So you want to be careful with that as we move forward with organics and animation. And again, NURB curves are for a particular, production, a particular development. So you would use them, and then polygons in other cases. In the next video, we'll explore, basically organizing our scene for development.